Hello and welcome, I am Thomas Porteous and you're watching NewsX World. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. Pakistan has fired along the line of control for a 12th straight night, prompting a proportionate response from the Indian Army. The UN chief urges restraint as the UNSC meets behind closed doors, while India's Home Secretary convenes a civil defence meeting. Israel's Security Cabinet approves a plan to seize all of Gaza and control aid flow, with Netanyahu promising an intensive anti-Hamas campaign. The operation will start after President Trump's Middle East visit, leaving a brief window for hostage and ceasefire talks. Russia says it downed 19 Ukrainian drones targeting Moscow in a major overnight attack that shut 4 airports and shook the capital. Moscow escapes casualties, but drone debris hits a key highway as cities like Voronezh and Penza report similar strikes. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney arrives in Washington to meet with President Donald Trump, focusing on trade and security issues. The high-stakes discussions are expected to be difficult but constructive, with no immediate resolutions expected. Israeli jets strike Houthi targets in Yemen's Hodeidah after a missile hits near Ben Gurion Airport, injuring 6 and disrupting flights. The Houthis threaten to block Israeli airspace and more airlines as Netanyahu vows more retaliation against the group. Germany's mainstream parties sign a coalition deal after the February election to stabilise the country following government collapse. The agreement includes higher defence spending, economic reforms and migration curbs, with CDU's Friedrich Merz set to become Chancellor today. All 133 cardinals eligible to elect the next pope have arrived in Rome, with the conclave set to begin on Wednesday in the Sistine Chapel. The vote will shape the Church's future and determine Pope Francis's successor. Rihanna, Shah Rukh Khan and Chappell Roan lead a star-studded Met Gala celebrating superfine tailoring, black style and menswear. Vogue's Anna Wintour joins co-stars Coleman Domingo and Lewis Hamilton as Zendaya, Doechii and Bad Bunny walk the red carpet. Amid rising tensions, Pakistan has once again provoked India with repeated ceasefire violations. In the night between May the 5th and May the 6th, the Pakistan Army opened unprovoked small arms fire across the line of control, targeting Indian positions opposite Kupwara, Baramulla, Poonch, Rajapuri, Medher, Nuwara, Sundarabani, and Kaur in Jammu and Kashmir. This marks the 12th ceasefire violation by Pakistan. The Indian Army responded proportionately, it said. In a major move, India has shut the Salal Dam on the Chenab River in Raisi, cutting off water flow to Pakistan. This follows India's recent suspension of the Indus Water Treaty. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, during his visit to Islamabad, urged both India and Pakistan to show restraint and avoid further escalation. India's suspension of the Indus Water Treaty has triggered alarm in Pakistan. The country is now bracing for a water shortage in the upcoming Kharif season. Pakistan's Indus River System Authority has already declared a 21% water shortfall for the early Kharif period. India is also ramping up efforts to diplomatically isolate Pakistan. New Delhi has asked the Asian Development Bank to hold a board meeting on May the 20th and is preparing to present fresh evidence at an IMF meeting on May the 9th, highlighting how international funds are allegedly being diverted towards terror-related activities. Meanwhile, India has successfully test-fired a homegrown underwater naval mine designed to counter submarines and stealth vessels. The new weapon adds a significant edge to the Indian Navy's maritime capabilities. The United Nations chief has weighed in on the escalating India-Pakistan tensions. Here's what he said.
Tensions between India and Pakistan are at their highest in years. I deeply respect and I am profoundly grateful to the government of people of both countries and their significant contributions to the work of the United Nations, not least UN peacekeeping. And so it pains me to see relations reaching a boiling point. I understand the raw feelings following the awful terror attack in Pahalgam on 22 April. I once again strongly condemn that attack and extend my condolences to the families of the victims. Targeting civilians is unacceptable, and those responsible must be brought to justice through credible lawful means.
We are now joined by Major General Gigi Dawidi, Global Strategic Defence Expert, to discuss this in more detail. Thank you very much for joining us, General Dawidi. This has been going on for 12 straight days now, 12 violations by Pakistan along the line of control in Kashmir. How prepared is the Indian Army for a potential escalation, not just along the line of control and also in general in India?
Well, Thomas, firstly, thanks for having me on your show. Well, after the dastardly attack perpetrated by Pakistan, its handlers and planners at Pahalgam, Pakistan has been on a very provocative responses, and these are obvious from the way they have activated the line of control. Incidentally, there was a ceasefire agreement between India and Pakistan on the LOC since 2003, which was again ratified in 2021. But Pakistan has chosen to actually escalate this situation further. Now, Indian Army is well prepared. I, having served in these areas over a prolonged period, well, we have all our plans in place, and we have the ability to escalate and also raise the level as and when required. So I think the Pakistan is in jittery, they are in panic, and they are resorting to this kind of activities, which obviously are going to be responded overwhelmingly, because Pakistan has actually suspended this agreement on the LOC. Therefore, Indian forces are fully within the right to respond in the manner which is most befitting. The second point, Thomas, is that Pakistan has taken advantage of India's benevolence. And case in point is the Indus Water Treaty, which is heavily in favor of Pakistan because they almost use 80% of waters. So India has taken certain slew of steps, both economically and diplomatically, which is actually going to have lasting impact. Not only that, even on the battlefield, like in 1971, I fought that war. India inflicted a crushing defeat on Pakistan, but without any condition, we returned 90,000 of the prisoners. Again, Pakistan has taken advantage of our benevolence and treated this as possibly our weakness. As far as UNSC is concerned, well, we appreciate the United States, US UN Secretary General expressing his condolences and condemnation. But this is Pakistan ploy always to drag the issues to UN and also to force their allies like Iran, China, and Turkey to come and mediate. So these are all the ploys which Pakistan will actually undertake or have resorted to.
Yes.
But my final point is, this is the time that India needs to give a very, very firm response to Pakistan, because it has gone on to orchestrate the proxy war for the last 3.5 decades. And this is the time now to bring Pakistan to its knees and deter it so that we are able to end this menace once and for all. Thomas.
Yes, Major General Dawidi, you did briefly mention the Indus Water Treaty, but now obviously an immediate reaction to the 22nd attack, and now it is coming into action with India now shutting the Salal Dam. Is this a justified retaliatory step or a risky precedent that could potentially draw international backlash?
Firstly, Thomas, that this treaty was heavily in favor of Pakistan, and India wanted to renegotiate this treaty. And in fact, once again, I would like to bring out that it's in India's benevolence that we went in for treaty. Like China, they control the upper Riparian rivers like Yarlung Tsampo or the Brahmaputra or the Mekong, but they have not signed any treaty. So therefore, India was very, we have the policy of neighbor first, we signed the treaty. And now, of course, we have suspended the treaty, and you are right that we have closed down the gates, sluice gates at Salal and Bagilha, which are on the Chenab River. And the water in Chenab River have fallen from about 20, 25, 30 feet to hardly 3, 4 feet. So therefore, impact is being felt. And remember, Pakistan is an agrarian economy. 20% of its GDP comes from agriculture. So they are going to feel the pinch. And that is what is the intention, because if they don't mend the ways, that India has enough levers to ensure that Pakistan changes its ways and is deterred. And these are one of the steps that India has taken, but I am sure much more are going to follow, and Pakistan would realize its folly and possibly mend its ways. If it doesn't, then of course further ways are going to be instituted, and that would be in form of punitive kinetic strikes, for which India is fully prepared. And there were reports that we already activated our civil defense organization structures, and plans are being done to give Pakistan the right knock, because so far Pakistan Army had a field day. There's a time to bring them into the ring and give a knockout punch. Thomas.
I just want to fit this last question in very quickly. Obviously, the aim of India right now is to isolate Pakistan diplomatically. How effective has India been in recent years at isolating Pakistan globally? Should India push for sanctions or conditional aid restrictions on Pakistan at these forums, especially with Western nations focused on counter-terror financing?
Well, Thomas, India did succeed quite effectively, because we were able to get Pakistan on the grey list, but somehow Pakistan wriggled it out. And the diplomatic offensive is very important, because global polity must realize that this state, which is the harbinger of terrorists, it's the hub of terrorism, has all variety of terrorists, it must be brought to the book. And Pakistan economically today is in a very dire state. So therefore, diplomatic measures will prove very effective, and India is on it, especially like IMF has been misutilized to encourage or orchestrate terrorist activities. I think these will go side by side, but India is taking multiple measures, both in the diplomatic, economic, and of course, in time to come in the military means. So ultimately, the Pakistan has to be squeezed from all directions, because this is rogue state, a failing state which has failed, which has not actually agreed to mend its ways. Thomas.
Major General Dawidi, thank you very much for joining us on the programme. Let's now turn to the Middle East, where Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has announced a more intensive offensive against Hamas in Gaza, approved by the Security Cabinet, potentially involving the full seizure of the enclave and tighter control over aid. The operation will be delayed until the US President Donald Trump's visit to the Middle East, which aims to move civilians south and prevent aid from reaching Hamas. Israeli troops already control a third of Gaza, and new plans could transfer aid distribution to private firms. Amid warnings of famine, protests are growing in Israel for a hostage deal. The military is calling up reservists, and Israel may act if no agreement is reached during Trump's visit. Hamas rejected the plan and demanded a full ceasefire, an Israeli withdrawal, and the release of all prisoners from both sides. With over 52,000 Palestinians killed since October 7th and 59 hostages still held, Israel faces mounting domestic and international pressure, even as it prepares for a potential broader regional conflict. Let's listen in to what the Israeli army spokesman, F.A. Defrin, has said.
יש לנו תוכנית סדורה. אנחנו מתקדמים ועוברים לשלב חדש ועצים יותר. המבצע יכלול מתקפה רחבה, הכוללת הנאה של מרבית אוכלוסיית הרצועה. זאת על מנת להגן עליה.
Meanwhile, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres is alarmed by Israel's plan to expand its Gaza offensive, warning it will cause more civilian deaths and destruction. His spokesman stressed Gaza must remain part of any future Palestinian state. Meanwhile, President Trump reaffirmed the US commitment to delivering food aid to Palestinians in Gaza when questioned about Israel's planned expanded offensive, but did not comment on the military operation. Speaking briefly to reporters at the White House, let's listen in.
We're going to help the people of Gaza get some food. People are starving, and we're going to help them get some food. A lot of people are making it very, very bad. If you look, Hamas is making it impossible because they're taking everything that's brought in. But we're going to help the people of Gaza because they're being treated very badly by Hamas. Thank you.
We're now joined by Professor Madhav Nalaput, editorial director of the Sunday Guardian, to discuss this in further detail. Professor Nalaput, thank you very much for joining us. Israel already controls a third of the Gaza Strip. Why escalate now, especially with international warnings of famine and humanitarian collapse?
Look, the international community has done very little so far to prevent Hamas from running Gaza. I'm sorry to say, a terror organization has been running the territory of Gaza. And unfortunately, a large part of the population of Gaza was radicalized, many by coercion, because if you don't become part of Hamas, you're in deep trouble. You face a threat even to your life, or at least freedom, not only you, but your whole family. So that has been going on for a very long time, and the international community has done nothing about it. On the other hand, it has flooded Gaza with food and other assistance, so that frankly, Gazans who have no jobs, frankly, they have no jobs, they're living very well thanks to assistance, and that's a very good thing. The more people benefit from assistance, the better. But I'd like to say that I think Hamas made the mistake of its life by attacking Israel on that terrible October 7 day, and the Israelis are not what they were during the Second World War and previous to that. The Jewish people have understood that sometimes they need to fight. And the state of Israel is a very, very militarized state. Every able-bodied Israeli has served in the Israeli military or is asked to serve in the Israeli military. And people have come from United States, UK, you name it, different countries with multiple citizenships to serve in the Israeli army. So frankly, Israel is determined to put an end to the military wing of Hamas once and for all.
Professor Nalaput, obviously release the hostages has been echoing throughout this entire time period. During that ceasefire from the 19th of January to March the 18th, a total of 33 of these Israeli hostages were released. Since then, since Israel broke the ceasefire, there's been none. What does this say about Israel's strategy in getting these hostages back, which they have been very, very vocal about, is so important to them? And I mean, we've seen protests on the street of Tel Aviv on a weekly, if not daily basis to try and get these hostages back. Why does Israel continue its military operations if it does care about getting these hostages back?
I'm sorry, you have to pose that question to Hamas. In my view, if Hamas were to give back all the hostages, it would be a very good gesture. And if they were to voluntarily disarm, then I think that would protect Gaza from any further Israeli action. The reality is those hostages need to be brought back, and the onus is not on Israel. Israel doesn't hold the hostages. Hamas does. Hamas knows where they are. Israel possibly does not know where most of them are. And they're in extremely dire condition. Hamas, as an ideology, is committed to the complete elimination of the Jewish people. Forget about the Jewish state, the Jewish people. And can you imagine being in the custody of of sort of a group that wants your entire people to be eliminated. So I would like to say that I think if Hamas has got any chance of helping the people of Gaza and saving itself from further destruction, it will voluntarily disarm and voluntarily give back the Israeli hostages. That gesture alone will ensure that Gaza will be prevented from the huge operation that Israel is planning now. Don't forget, Thomas, this was an existential battle.
Yes.
The Jewish people are determined never to lose an existential battle again after the horror of the Holocaust. So that is what I would advise Hamas. Give back all the hostages, please. Those who are surviving, those who have not survived, please give them back now, and then voluntarily disarm and run a civilian government, because if you do not, then unfortunately, not only you, but the entire people of Gaza are going to suffer a horrible fate. Thank you.
Professor Madhav Nalapat, thank you very much for joining us. We stay in the Middle East now, where on Monday massive fires broke out at a cement factory in Yemen following Israeli airstrikes on Hodeidah port and nearby areas. The strikes came just a day after Houthi rebels fired a missile that landed near Israel's main airport. Footage aired by Houthi-run media showed scenes of devastation at the Barjil cement factory east of Hodeidah. Firefighters were seen battling intense blazes. One body was found among the rubble of a collapsed structure. At least 21 people were injured, according to the Houthi-run health ministry. Residents told that more than 10 strikes hit areas around Hodeidah, including the Salak, Kana and Al-Hawak. The Houthis have since sealed off the affected zones, including the port and the factory. Israel said it targeted what it called Houthi terrorist infrastructure. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was seen overseeing the operation from the Air Force Command Center in Tel Aviv, joined by Defense Minister Israel Katz and the Army Chief Eyal Zamir. While the Houthis claimed the airstrikes were a joint Israeli-US operation, a US official denied any involvement. We stay in the Middle East once again, where Iran is warning the United States not to fall into what it calls a disaster in the Middle East, blaming Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu for stoking tensions. Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi made the statement on Monday, accusing Netanyahu of meddling in US policy and pushing Washington towards another regional war. In a post on X, Araghchi warned the US against making any mistake involving Iran, saying Netanyahu is dictating terms to President Donald Trump over Iran's diplomacy. He also slammed the US for backing Israel's military campaign in Gaza and its strikes on Houthi rebels in Yemen, describing both as failed efforts serving Netanyahu's agenda. According to Araghchi, American nations in support of Israel have brought nothing for the American people. This comes after Netanyahu blamed Iran for the latest Houthi missile strike near Israel's main airport and vowed to retaliate. Separately, Iran is also pressing the US to drop what it calls unrealistic demands in stalled nuclear talks. In a call with the European Union Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas, Araghchi said a deal is still possible, but only if Washington adopts more logistical and flexible positions. Tehran maintains it is ready to address nuclear concerns, but insists the path forward lies with the United States. Now let's move over to Europe, where tensions are rising again between Russia and Ukraine after another wave of drone attacks shook Moscow overnight. Russia says Ukraine launched multiple drones towards the capital for the second night in a row. At least 19 were shot down before reaching the city, according to Moscow's mayor. All 4 of the capital's major airports were shut for hours but later reopened. No casualties have been reported, however, though debris from the drones landed on major roads. Meanwhile, Russian officials say several other cities, including Penza, Voronezh, were also targeted. Ukraine hasn't officially commented, but Kharkiv's mayor says Russia also launched drone attacks on Ukrainian cities overnight. One person was killed in a strike on Odessa. In the border region of Kursk, Russia claims Ukraine tried to cross into its territory. Military bloggers say Ukrainian forces used armored vehicles to breach tank traps and minefields, triggering heavy clashes. Russia also reported missile strikes and the destruction of a power substation in Rylusk, where 2 teenagers were reportedly injured by shrapnel. Kiev says its forces remain inside the Kursk region 9 months after first crossing the border in a surprise operation. Officials in Ukraine's Sumy region, just 12 kilometers from the border, are now urging civilians to evacuate amid growing security concerns. It's now turned to North America, where Prime Minister Mark Carney arrived in Washington to meet President Donald Trump, aiming to ease tensions over US tariffs and controversial remarks suggesting Canada should become a US state, which has strained bilateral relations. Meanwhile, Trump has said he wasn't sure why Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney was visiting, but added, "I guess he wants to make a deal." The two leaders are set for tense talks today in Washington amid a deepening trade dispute over US tariffs, which Carney has called a betrayal. Carney has accused the US president of trying to break Canada and urged a reduction in economic reliance on the United States. He also emphasized the need to rebuild bilateral defense and security ties ahead of the meeting.
I'm not sure what he wants to see me about, but I guess he wants to make a deal. Everybody does. They all want to make a deal because we have something that they all want. We have something that they all want. China wants to make a deal very badly. You see what's happening to China. China is being decimated, and I don't want that to happen.
We, of course, stay in the United States, where the Trump administration will now offer a $1,000 stipend and travel assistance to migrants who voluntarily choose to leave the United States. The Department of Homeland Security says this program is cheaper than formal deportation, which costs an average of $17,000 per person. Since taking office in January, President Donald Trump has deported 152,000 people, falling short of 195,000 deported by the Biden administration during the same period last year. The Trump administration has been pushing voluntary departures through fines, legal status removals, and deportations to notorious foreign prisons. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says self-deportation is the best, safest, and most cost-effective way to avoid arrest. In March, the administration launched a rebranded app called CBP Home to support this initiative. It was previously known as CBP One under the Biden administration. President Trump has suggested that migrants who leave voluntarily could be considered for re-entry if they are good and wanted back in. However, DHS did not provide any specific pathway for legal return. The immigrant advocacy group Make the Road New York criticized the program, calling it cruel and misleading. The group urges migrants to consult with attorneys before accepting the offer. Let's listen in to what Donald Trump had to say about the issue.
We thought we'd do is a self-deport, where we're going to pay each one a certain amount of money, and we're going to get them a beautiful flight back to where they came from, and they have a period of time. And if they make it, we're going to work with them so that maybe someday, with a little work, they can come back in if they're good people, if they're the kind of people that we want in our company, industrious people that could love our country. And if they're not, they won't. But it will give them a path to becoming, to coming back in.
U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth has ordered a 20% cut in 4-star officers, escalating sweeping Pentagon reforms under President Donald Trump's second term. Hegseth, a former Fox News host, is pushing to shrink the military's top ranks, calling them over-bloated. He's also cutting general officers in the National Guard by at least 20% and reducing general and flag officers across the military by another 10%. Hegseth posted a video on X saying the move aims to boost strategic readiness, adding he worked with the Joint Chiefs on the plan. He's already removed the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the top Navy Admiral, and the NSA director. Senator Jack Reed has slammed the plan, warning it could cripple the military if based on arbitrary preferences. Meanwhile, the Pentagon is reviewing its global structure, and Hegseth is considering merging combatant commands like AFRICOM and EUCOM to slash more four-star posts. US President Donald Trump signed an executive order on Monday banning federal funding for gain-of-function research, which involves enhancing infectious pathogens such as avian flu, SARS, and MERS. The order also pauses all domestic research involving potentially dangerous pathogens and toxins until a safer, more enforceable and transparent policy is established. According to a White House fact sheet, the ban extends to foreign countries including China and Iran and aims to reduce the risk of lab-related incidents, citing past research on bat coronavirus by the EcoHealth Alliance and the Wuhan Institute of Virology. The White House emphasized the need to prevent future biological risks through stricter oversight. The US Office of Science and Technology Policy, along with the National Security Advisor, will be responsible for drafting new safety standards to govern such high-risk research activities moving forward. We move back over to Europe once again, where all 133 cardinals eligible to vote for the next pope have arrived in Rome, the Vatican has confirmed. The secret conclave to elect a successor to Pope Francis will begin on May the 7th in the Sistine Chapel. Pope Francis died last month, and only cardinals under 80 will vote. Some seek a continuation of his reforms, while others want a return to traditional doctrine. Cardinals have been meeting nearly every day since April the 21st to discuss the future of the Church. On Monday, 180 cardinals joined a key session, including 132 electors. One more elector is in Rome but did not attend. 2 cardinals from Spain and Kenya will miss the conclave due to health issues. The Vatican says cardinals expressed concern about church divisions and debated the ideal profile of the next pope, a leader who is present, approachable, and connected to people's daily lives. Let's now move back over to the United States, where the biggest night in fashion took place in New York City, as the 2025 Met Gala was held at the Metropolitan Museum of Art on Manhattan's Upper East Side. This year's theme, superfine black tailoring style, is the first since 2003 to solely focus on menswear. The exhibition explores the role of fashion in shaping black identity across the Atlantic diaspora, with a focus on the black dandy. The event was co-chaired by Vogue editor-in-chief Anna Wintour, actor Coleman Domingo, and Formula One driver Lewis Hamilton. High-profile guests included Zendaya, Doechii, Shah Rukh Khan, Bad Bunny, and Rihanna, who made a late appearance on the blue carpet before heading inside. The gala raises money for the Costume Institute and marks the opening of its annual fashion exhibition. Well, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for joining us on NewsX World.